For years, they made us believe that to become a legend, you had to be big, powerful, intimidating. But history tells a different story. There were small motorcycles, humble in engine size, that changed the world forever. Machines that taught people how to ride, that won impossible races, and that shaped entire generations. Bikes that didn't need a lot of horsepower, because they had soul. Today, we're going to travel back in time to relive the 10 most legendary small motorcycles in history, the ones that prove greatness isn't measured in cubic centimeters. Number 10. Cagiva Mito 125, the Mini Ducati. Italy didn't design the Mito with its head, it designed it with its heart. Directly inspired by the Ducati 916, the Cagiva Mito 125 was born in the early 90s as a statement of intent to make a 125 look, sound, and feel like a real superbike. Sharp fairing, perimeter frame, serious suspension, and a wild two-stroke engine that screamed loudly. It guzzled fuel, needed a mix, and demanded skillful hands. It wasn't practical, it wasn't logical, and that's exactly why it was loved. The Mito didn't want to be a learner bike, it wanted to be a poster on wheels. Its visceral character, explosive power delivery, and many 916 looks turned it into an absolute icon of the 1990s. Many dreamed of it, few understood it, and even fewer knew how to ride it fast. Today, it's a cult object, a symbol of an era when small bikes didn't ask for permission to thrill. The Mito wasn't rational, it was pure Italian passion, packed into 125 cubic centimeters. Number 9. Kawasaki KR-1S. The Kawasaki KR-1S appeared at the end of the 80s as an all-out declaration of war. 250cc, two-stroke, featherweight, and zero concessions to the rider. Kawasaki took everything it had learned in racing and poured it into a street bike that bordered on reckless for its time. A rigid chassis, aggressive geometry, and an explosive engine that delivered power all at once. No warning, no electronics, and no mercy. It wasn't designed for learning, but for surviving it. The KR-1S earned a reputation as a little killer because its power-to-weight ratio was obscene, even compared to bigger bikes. It barely stopped, accelerated like a missile, and demanded steady hands and a cool head. A throttle mistake or a bad line came at a high price. Today, it's an absolute cult bike, rare, sought after, and respected. Remembered as a bullet with handlebars that proved Kawasaki was never afraid to make wild bikes, even if they scared half the world. Number 8. Derbi GPR 50 Racing. The Derbi GPR 50 Racing showed up in the late 90s as a direct challenge to common sense. About 50 cubic centimeters, dressed up like a liter superbike with a racing-style perimeter frame, fairings, sharp lines, and an aggressive riding position that made anyone believe they were looking at something much bigger and more dangerous. It wasn't just about looks. Derbi wanted the rider to feel like a racer from the very first meter, with a stiff, tough, and demanding bike designed to feel more like a miniature GP bike than just a simple learner motorcycle. Its impact was huge because it broke the mold of slow, cheap 50C bikes. The GPR had presence, attitude, and character, and it forced the whole industry to take small-displacement sport bikes seriously. It wasn't comfortable, it wasn't tame, and it never tried to be. Its mission was to make you dream of racetracks, knees scraping the ground, and posters on your wall. That's why today it's a cult bike. Because it fooled an entire generation and proved that sometimes size matters less than ambition. Honda NSR 125 and 50. The Honda NSR 125 and NSR 50 were born from an almost absurd idea to bring Grand Prix DNA to small street bikes. Honda wasn't after practicality, they were after technical perfection, aluminum perimeter frames, geometry, racing, fierce two-stroke engines, and a sound that seemed straight out of a GP pit box. They were demanding, twitchy bikes full of character, designed more to be felt than to be reasoned with. The NSR 125 was the ultimate teenage dream. A 125 that handled like a big bike with serious brakes, real suspension, and a power band that begged you to keep the revs high. The NSR 50, on the other hand, was pure madness. A street-legal mini GP bike, so precise and radical it almost seemed unnecessary, and that's exactly why it was irresistible. Small in displacement, huge in ambition. Both shared the same obsessive spirit. Honda, proven it could do better, even if no one asked for it. They weren't logical bikes, nor cheap to maintain, but they left their mark on entire generations, and today they're cult classics. The NSRs didn't want to be popular. They wanted to be perfect. And in that excess, in that Japanese stubbornness for excellence, they became legends. Number 6. Aprilia RS 125. The Aprilia RS 125 was born in the 90s with a clear mission: for a 16-year-old kid to feel like a Grand Prix racer. It wasn't just another 125. It was a statement of intent. Chassis, double aluminum beam, racing geometry, radical riding position, and a look directly inspired by the RSV superbikes. While other 125s look like toys, the RS looked like a real motorcycle, just in a smaller scale. Under the fairing beat a single-cylinder engine, a fierce two-stroke straight out of the racing world, able to rev all the way to the red line with an unmistakable metallic scream. It had no low end, didn't forgive mistakes, and demanded you always keep the revs high. But that was where the magic was. It forced you to learn how to really ride, to brake late, to nail your lines. It was a school for racers disguised as a street bike. Over time, it became a legend. It was the first serious bike for thousands of future champions, and today it's an absolute cult object. Well-preserved RS 125s fetch a high price because they represent a one-of-a-kind era. A time when a 125 could have Brembo brakes, adjustable suspension, and a racetrack soul. It wasn't practical, it wasn't comfortable, but it made you feel invincible. A miniature superbike, no excuses. Number 5. Yamaha TZ 125. The Yamaha TZ 125. It wasn't designed to please or to be sold in dealerships. It was created for one thing only: to train real riders, born as a pure racing bike. No compromises. The TZ 125 was a two-stroke weapon, absurdly light, and built to rev high, very high. It had no lights, no key, no forgiveness. It was the gateway to the real world of racing, where talent mattered more than horsepower. Its single-cylinder two-stroke demanded surgical precision, reaching up to 14,000 RPM. You had to keep it in the sweet spot, no exceptions, because down low there was nothing and up high there was glory, or disaster. The chassis, stiff and direct, transmitted absolutely everything: grip, slides, and mistakes. The TZ didn't correct errors, it amplified them. That's why, if you learned to go fast on a TZ 125, you could handle anything afterward. It was a cruel teacher, but an honest one. Entire generations of champions went through it. Riders who later shined in 250, 500, and MotoGP first learned to respect a TZ 125. It didn't teach you how to accelerate. It taught you how to brake, how to take a line, and how to be precise. If you were smooth, you'd fly. If you were rough, you'd end up on the ground. Today, it's an absolute legend, respected and feared, because the TZ 125 didn't make motorcyclists. He trained real pilots. Number 4. Kreidler Florett RS. The Kreidler Florett RS was the German response to Japanese dominance in the smaller engine displacement category. And he did it his way, lacking charisma, without romanticism, but with a precision that was frantic. In the late 1960s and throughout the 1970s, Kreidler took an engine of just 50cc and turned it into a pure engineering weapon, capable of revving to absurd levels with a reliability that made many more powerful rivals look ridiculous. They weren't looking to excite, they were looking to win. Meanwhile, while Honda and Suzuki were betting on complex solutions and increasingly extreme designs, Kreidler was fine-tuning every screw as if it were a Swiss watch on steroids. The Florett RS stood out for its stability, its precision in corners, and an obsessive build quality. It didn't vibrate, it didn't fail, and it didn't forgive rivals' mistakes. On the track, it didn't need to dominate with power, but with consistency. Lap after lap, it was identical, relentless, mathematically perfect. That's why it earned its reputation as the German terror. It wasn't pretty, it didn't sound glorious, and it didn't stir up passion, but it won. And in racing, that's the only thing that matters. It was one of the few European manufacturers capable of looking Honda and Suzuki in the 50 cubic centimeter class and really making them sweat. The Kreidler Florett RS didn't win because of charisma or epic moments. It won because it never made mistakes. And that, in the world of small motorcycles, is the most terrifying thing there is. Number 3. Honda RC166. If Angels had a motorcycle, it would be this one. The Honda RC166 wasn't just a racing bike, it was an unprecedented display of technical power. At a time when most manufacturers were looking for simple solutions, Honda decided to go in the opposite direction and created a piece of engineering that was almost absurd. A 6-cylinder inline engine with just 250 cubic centimeters, capable of revving up to 18,000 RPM, when most street bikes could barely dream of reaching half that. Each cylinder was smaller than a glass, but together they created a perfect mechanical symphony. That engine delivered around 60 horsepower, a figure that might seem modest today, but in the 1960s was downright insane for that displacement. The truly incredible thing wasn't just the power, but how it was delivered. Smooth, progressive, and constant, allowing the engine to always stay in the high rev range. The RC166 didn't just push, it sang, and the higher it revved, the better it performed. It was a bike designed to live at the top end, where others would simply blow up. On the track, the RC166 was simply unbeatable. In the hands of Mike Halewood, Honda dominated the 250cc World Championship between 1966 and 1968, winning practically every race it entered. It wasn't a close fight, it was a technical knockout, while its rivals struggled with vibrations, breakdowns, and a lack of reliability. The RC166 ran like a Swiss watch with a Japanese soul. It wasn't racing against other bikes. It was racing against the history of motorcycling. Its sound became legendary. Even today, decades later, engineers, riders, and fans all agree it's the best sound ever produced by a motorcycle engine. It wasn't deep or aggressive. It was high-pitched, pure, almost unreal. Like a musical instrument tuned to perfection. Hearing an RC166 at full throttle is to understand that motorcycling can also be art. That's why it didn't just win races, it won immortality. Number 2, Honda RC116, the 21,000 RPM masterpiece. The Honda RC116 was a 50cc, twin-cylinder, but not just any twin. It was a piece of Japanese watchmaking taken to the extreme. 2 tiny cylinders, double overhead camshafts, 4 valves per cylinder, and the ability to rev over 20,000, 21,000 RPM with 9 gears. Something that even today sounds unreal. Every component was designed to reduce friction. Weight and tolerances, with materials and machining that seemed straight out of the aerospace industry. At a time when most people barely understood how to make a 50 cubic centimeter engine reliable, Honda was building micromotors capable of revving faster than many modern bikes. Unlike the Suzuki RK67, which was brutal and extreme, the RC116 was absolute precision. It wasn't just about maximum power, but about consistency, reliability, and repeatability, lap after lap. Honda understood that winning championships wasn't just about going fast, but about finishing every race. And that's where the RC116 was lethal. Tuned, consistent, and almost impossible to break. Its sound wasn't a wild scream, but a sharp, clean buzz. Almost musical, like a miniature turbine, a perfect note that rose without vibrations or roughness, showing that Honda didn't just master engineering, but mechanical harmony. It was a bike that seemed to demand precision from you. Surgical precision, not blind courage. The RC116 did not intimidate you, it made you feel small. Because you knew the bike was more perfect than you were. The most impressive thing is that this bike actually existed. It wasn't a concept or a lab prototype. It raced, it won, and it defined an era. But it was also the logical limit of analog engineering. Building something like this today would be economically infeasible, even for Honda. Too many parts, too much time, too much love, for a result that today's market would never understand. And in first place, the Suzuki RK67, the one that roared like an angry mosquito. In 1967, when most 50cc bikes were little more than bicycles with engines, Suzuki lost its mind and created the RK67. A machine that defied all human logic. 50 cubic centimeters, twin-cylinder engine, liquid cooling, over 17 horsepower, and a red line above 20,000 RPM. To put it in perspective, today many street bikes don't even rev to half of that. And then there's the fact that it still makes engineers laugh. 14 gears, it wasn't an exaggeration, it wasn't marketing, it was a necessity. Because that engine lived in a microscopic power band, and if you missed a shift, the engine would drop out of its power range and goodbye race. Riding it was like playing a surgical instrument at 300 kilometers per hour wearing boxing gloves. 14 shifts. It's not a mistake, 14. The RK67 dominated the 50cc World Championship in the 1960s. With humiliating authority. It didn't win by brute force. It won through extreme engineering. Every lap was a masterclass in applied mechanics. Tiny crankshafts. Absurd tolerances, parts crafted almost like Swiss watchmaking. While other manufacturers tried to squeeze out more power by brute force, Suzuki crushed everyone with brains, precision, and obsession. The rivals had no idea where to attack. The RK67 accelerated like an enraged wasp, maintained ridiculous cornering speeds for its engine size, and forced riders to work like surgeons. The slightest mistake meant immediate disaster. It was unforgiven, but when everything went right, it was unstoppable. This bike was the ultimate proof of something that's still hard to accept today. Brains can crush brute force. The Suzuki RK67 didn't just win races. It redefined what was possible with a small engine. It was so advanced, so expensive, and so complex that it ended up being unfeasible even for Suzuki. But it left an everlasting mark. It proved that small bikes could be the most legendary, the most technical, and the most humiliating for the rest of the world. So if you ever come across an RK67, remember, size doesn't matter, it's how you use it. And if you want to learn more about the RK67, click on this video.